So, and now you have to make a choice for Damwon Kia, and they have very consistently gone towards the Udyr. First pick here gives you a lot of control over vision. It's also going to be a champion that allows Canyon to really control the mid lane with he likes to roam there, he likes to look for picks there, and it's going to put the tempo into their favor early on.
Well, we'll see exactly what happens as, of course, the Nidalee Renekton is available, Aphelios Thresh also available, but Zenithal Kench has been left up as well, so Damwon Kia can head towards that right now.
And I would not be surprised to see him go for that. I do think that the Aphelios will be able to consistently fight aggressive pressure and priority in that lane and aim high top. Okay, well, never mind that. And this is a brilliant move by Damwon Kia, because one of the risks of running into an Aphelios with Senna is that a wave clear is not necessarily as good. But if you combine it with Barrel's high that they have, a lot of this problem goes away, and you can't hook if there's a turret in front of you.
No, you certainly not. And we're going to see the Graves come through as a response to the Udyr now. So a lot of range damage on the side of Gen.G. But I feel like this Senna Heimerdinger is really going to throw a little bit of a curveball here to Gen.G. It's difficult to lane into this, but how it scales later on in the game is going to be interesting to see as well. We see the Akali ban here. With Udyr, often we see a lot of players right now going towards the Zoe in mid lane because you have a lot of extra vision control. You're very safe in the mid lane with the Zoe pick there with Udyr. So curious to see if Gen.G decide to take that away now from Showmakers. One of his top picks as well, his second most played this season.
Yeah, what I'm thinking about is the top lane, right? It's been completely ignored to this point in time outside of that Narban that has been taken away by Gen.G. Will it be just BKs there towards the top side, and is the Cho'Gath going to be part of the problem?
And something that Gen.G has done in their past draft is they saved the counter pick for Rascal, and then they still just take a tank. It's just to make sure that Khan doesn't blind pick some, or like doesn't get the counter pick, get something like a Jace into a Sion, where you know that Khan is going to bully that lane. But you can't blind pick that, right? So by saving that top lane pick and picking something like a Syndra that's not banned away, and Orianna here for BDD on R4, that means you can use your R5 for a very comfortable tank matchup, and if Khan goes for something aggressive, there it is!
Well, this could just be an indication that we're seeing Damwon Kia heading towards the Sion pick once again, but you don't really need that strong of a front line with this comp already. Heimerdinger is going to give you a lot of extra frontline power in a lot of these team fights. You have good range with the Senna already. You don't necessarily need to pick the Sion here, but it is a safe pick. They could go with it. It's going to be the BDD who gets the first Syndra here of this best of 5, and he had a great performance against T1. Let's see if we can see those Scar of the Weeks once again.
Yeah, this is actually really interesting because we might actually get the Zoe versus Syndra matchup that both of these players were talking about in the trash talk. It's Sion, there we go. That's the blind pick. I think the Cho'Gath band gave that one away. And now Damwon, what is their answer to the Syndra? Certainly a lot of interesting ones, but we're not expecting it. Victor is going to be the choice here by Showmaker.
And I quite like that. I think the Victor, even though it's not the most interesting of matchups.
Yeah. Beefcake versus Beefcake. That's what we're getting here for game number 1. Gen.G looking like a very Gen.G draft, and Damwon Kia similar on their side. But if you have a look at these straight down the line, both of them, a lot of late game power. But where do we put it, gentlemen? Chronicler, do we think this is exactly what Gen.G needed? Is it enough against Damwon Kia?
I think there is a lot of power here, but if BDD or Ruler, either of those doesn't get ahead, I'm afraid that in the long run, even with how strong their engagement pick potential is, you're gonna have issues actually being able to do damage consistently against these long-range carries coming through from the Victor and the Senna. Combined with the Heimerdinger makes it so much harder to actually get your Aphelios in a position where he's able to get through them.
I look at this and I think Damwon Kia has such a tough comp to break through, right? Like even if you get that great Scar of the Week, who are you hitting? Who are you killing here? Even if you're trying to make the clutch plays, you try to look for the hook, you're going to have such a hard problem actually getting that to connect. Even the Call of Force shot coming through from Ornn, it's just going to be so difficult. Sure, both of these teams scale well into the late game, but I feel like Damwon Kia's comp kind of plays itself, right? It's so easy to execute, and this is the best 5v5 front-to-back team fighting comp that we have in this league and potentially in the world. The defending world champions. I look at this draft and I think this is impossible to crack, even with what Gen.G have put together.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with impossible to crack, because if you look at the 2v2 in terms of jungle power, like in the early levels, it Graves in the Syndra, if you hit an early scatter, you find that play, you set it up, you can actually demolish anyone on the side or Damwon Kia,
our teams choosing a bit of scaling as the flavor for our first game. And I just want to go into a bit of mentality, a little slight rant, just a little one, gentlemen. Because of course, I think that having the onus on you to be proactive in a final that is so high pressure when emotions are running high, choose scaling. I think it is so intelligent. Gen.G did it very, very well against T1 in their first game, and now both of these teams are going in that direction for this one. And I think from a psychological perspective, it's a good way to play, because if you have pressure on you to make action, as well as the pressure on you of being in a final, it can compound.
Yeah, it certainly can. This is a team that has struggled in best of five for Gen.G. If you end up messing up the execution of this game, I mean, I feel like it's not only me who's feeling this. I mean, we've seen both coaches for both of these teams kind of say it feels like if Gen.G wins it, it has to be a one-sided series, and you're putting a lot of pressure on these players who did perform in the T1 series, but this is a different beast. This is a grand finals for Gen.G.
Yeah, and I actually think that bringing up the coaches is really interesting, right? Coma and Odin have been up against each other for many years, right? Like, of course, not last year because Coma took a year off and, traveled the world just a little bit. But now he's back, and both of these guys certainly having a lot of experience against one another.
And it's also always something that gives extra depth, and a lot of these players are so experienced, right? And they've played with each other, they played against each other, and to then see them in the finals is really exciting. I think if I look at where the actual action, in my opinion, is supposed to happen early on, I want to see Clid try and play around VDD in the mid lane here. We know how easy it is for Syndra to get that early prio, and if Clid can use that to maybe put some pressure on Canyon to force a flash on Showmaker early, it opens up a lot of possibilities around that first dragon.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that, Canyon is not the type of player who likes to play bodyguard, right? He's not the type of player who likes to defensively gank when these sort of plays happen. So you can bet that Showmaker is going to be left on his own quite a bit here in the mid lane of the matchup where there is kill pressure with the ability to scatter the weak here from BDD. So I do agree. I think the mid lane is going to be the most interesting part of this early game by far.
Well, you can see already BDD with a bit of a shove towards that mid lane. As far as the jungle is going, of course, Udia is going to have that clear advantage, and so he's going to be moving towards his red buff a little bit earlier than what Clid's going to be able to do. But I think it's after the first clear that things will get interesting when it comes to that jungle, with that extra time that Canyon may have around the map to try and get something done potentially. As you can see, Ruler and Life spending some time underneath their turret because, of course, Senna Heimerdinger is revolting. We unfortunately didn't manage to make it work. However, Damwon Kia, let's see whether they can.
It's something that's so hard to deal with in terms of priority, right? Because the Heimerdinger turrets kind of solve one of the few issues that Senna does have, especially if you combine it with something like a Tom Kench, which is what traditionally is done. Because it makes it so much harder for you to actually shove in consistently, especially against an Aphelios. This is the man with the most solo kills. So I'm going to be, even though it's 2 beefy boys, I'm going to be looking towards the top side. But I want to see Gen.G find a way to actually deal with this, because if Ruler and Life are going to be stuck on the turret, a big part of what makes this roster so dangerous is, in my opinion, going to be fully neutralized.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what this draft comes through with, right? I mean, you're willing to give up the threat, but you have the Heimerdinger, you're going to have that lane priority, you know that Life is going to be able to roam when he's stuck under turret. They also got the Risk Sculptor on the bottom side of the map, so they have a lot of extra vision, so they can feel very safe actually pushing up this aggressively when they have that vision advantage on the bottom side of the map. So it feels like everything's kind of going according to plan here for Damwon.
Yeah, and also, if you remember, think about the hardest champions to gank in League of Legends. Which one's literally at the very top of that list? It is 100% Heimerdinger. You walk towards those turrets, and it is largely a death sentence. And unfortunately, for Gen.G, yes, they have the ability name, but they do not have the Heimerdinger. So it is certainly something that they're going to have to think about, and getting a Heimerdinger out of position is how you take him down. So in this lane, I think it might be something that Gen.G just ignore and try to get advantages elsewhere.
The one upside, of course, for the Gen.G comp is that even though I think in terms of range it's going to be a little bit harder for them to get stuff done, they can be fine.
Oh, a little bit overextended.
Yeah, BDD in a bit of trouble. Gravity field goes down. Not going to get the stun just yet, but the follow flash. BDD on the wrong side of the map as now he's running through these raptors, and now it's a wild goose chase. He does have the blast cone as Canyon avoids it, but now, look, you are getting away slowly but surely. Is it going to be the execute? No, it is not, as not enough time has passed, and Showmaker picks up first blood in the end.
And this is the kind of, moment where you have to give respect to the Veer pick, right? If you don't know where Canyon is, you can't be pushed out that far. I get the idea here is, I'm Syndra, I have better range, I have a lot better poke than Victor at this stage of the game, I can harass, I can get that extra pressure on. But when you know your jungler is away, if you push that far, you're taking a risk, and
in the T1 series, they were able to actually make T1 suffer, right, and make T1 have problems, is that their laning was super consistent, that they were not getting ganked, that they were able to find leads just purely through laning. It's not happening right now.
Yeah, and if you remember back to that series, BDD didn't die once until game 3.
Yeah.
Like, this is a very different start to how that series went. First Blood already is going to be against BDD, and see how Gen.G is going to deal with it.
That's also going to be the first Drake, right? So that gives you Drake priority, Drake advantage here going into a mid game. And the Drakes that we have left, with this being an Ocean Drake to start things off, I mean, unless it ends up being a Cloud Soul, which, you know,
it's not. So that's fine.
Oh, there you go. That's right. It did pop up there. So it's not a Cloud Soul, in fact. So both of these are actually massively important, right? So this advantage could be huge for Damwon because they already have, in my opinion, the better and easier to execute team fighting comp for later on. They have this extra advantage in terms of getting to that very important final soul. And I mean, Flash not used for Showmaker either, by the way. So he's still very safe in the mid lane. This is only one kill, but it leads to so much more.
And it could lead to another kill potentially, because Canyon walking on in there, of course, Showmaker can close the distance with his flash if he would like to, but also means that now Damwon can play with a lot more pressure here in mid. We mentioned that mid lane is going to be very, very important. I think that Gen.G can't rely on bot pressure alone, and especially not in this game. We'll see how they are going to be able to bounce back from this situation, as it looks like it's being cleared. Trying to focus a little bit on farming things out, and Gen.G now moving their bottom lane top in order to try and get some of that Herald priority.
Now, this is a really early rotation though, and I think they will be able to get the shove. In terms of 1v2 potential, I personally give the edge to Kasai, though it is really hard into this matchup. Ruler, he's looking for some plays, but with Khan ulting in, I don't actually expect it to get a lot going. And if they pick up this early Herald, they're able to turn back the ball in their favor. It's looking a lot better for Gen.G. They need the setup though.
They need that Herald, because if they don't, I mean, this is obviously a very big mismatch. And you can see already Rascal struggling a lot more. The turrets are just going to naturally push this, and even add a little bit extra hook damage on Rascal when he tries to trade back even last if he's doing it. He's losing CS, he's losing turret plates here, and so you have to get the Herald. They're rotating over for the Herald, but they need this.
Yeah, the Herald actually looking for a potential dive right now, as there's the on Ghost already flashing as Rascal turns it the other way, but this is not working out how he wanted, as Beryl's tanking the turret for the moment, doesn't take that last shot, as Rascal looks to be okay, but the turret is disintegrating.
He's lost his flash here too, and look, I mean, they were trying to make this Herald play happen, but they were a little bit slow on it, a little bit of happy feeding there on the top side of the map.
I actually think that Gen.G rotated too early, and because of that, yes, they will get the Herald, they might get plates, but you give up so much more. If you keep Ruler and Life in that lane for a little bit longer, you might be able to get the swap, get the Herald without giving up this many plates, because now any gold that you get from the Herald has already been paid.
Yeah, and also guess who's coming up, right? Canyon is going to come and join this. Clip's not going to be able to just launch this for free. In fact, he's going to really struggle to get in there and actually drop this Herald, so you might not get those plates at all, at least not for a long time here. Canyon is absolutely ready to steal this away.
Yeah, you can see actually after Glid right now, as the line comes down, Canyon just going to ignore the Grace and take away the Shellfish. Now going to move up and look to see whether he can defend Khan, who has not even lost 50% of his health bar. He should be absolutely fine, as now we're just looking to clear out this mini wave, and pressure has dissipated. Meanwhile, on the bottom side, Gerald goes down.
Yeah, turret's already gone here, so yeah, you will get this charge off here, but you're not going to be able to really do anything else. The Herald's going to get cleared so quickly, and now you've got a jungle on this side of the map who's not accomplishing much. Meanwhile, look at the mid lane, you know? BD is pushed out, and this is such a rough spot for Gen.G to be in macro-wise.
And this is something that Damwon, in my opinion, did already show in the first round of Players Against Hardware Live. That's where they showed some weaknesses, but we know how good this team can be when they are up early on. And it's not just the mid-game macro, it's even the early-game macro, right? The first play goes well, there's a 30 CS advantage for Canyon right now into Clid, and sure, Clid will always be relevant later in the game, but it's not a position that you really want to be in as Gen.G, where you're already at a 2k gold deficit against a team that is so incredibly strong at closing out leads. The one upside is that Gen.G companies are really good at playing defensive, with their females makes it really hard to force.
Yeah, the thing that I'm looking at is which one of these teams is okay the most when it comes to just scaling up, getting to a late game. Like on one side, you've got ornaments that come in that inflate the amount of stats that you have on your team. Aphelios, phenomenal at getting that consistent damage in the late game, depending on which guns he's got. But then you look over the side of Damwon Kia, you have literally the best tank in the game, which is Sion. And then you have Senna and Heimerdinger. Senna infinitely scales, right? Like, and will also get more and more range, more and more power as the game goes on. I don't know whether it's enough of a trade-off here for Gen.G.
Yeah, I don't think so, you know, and that's kind of what I was saying in the parts of the draft, right, when we were looking at how this comp was going to scale up, and when they picked the Ornn pick, it's not a shock that Gen.G would round off the draft with that, but unfortunately, just making these, hold that thought, Cliff.
Yeah, Cliff thought that it was his jungle, but Canyon's trying to convince him otherwise. This guy's just going to get popped. BDD comes around the corner, and that's an overstep from the center.
And that might lead to a Drake coming in here, and as you do, you want to even up that Drake count. You have the harding edge available, because if you let Damwon get ahead in Drakes, your late game becomes way more strenuous.
Yeah, you have to, if you're not ahead on Drakes when that soul runs around, we don't know when it's going to be yet, but obviously both of the options are huge here. If you don't have that advantage, that means that Damwon get to sit back and force every fight on their terms.
Cliff, yeah, a little down. Yeah, a little bit out of position here as BDD over to the side. Life is going to come in. Dawning Shadows flies through, but doesn't really do too much. And now Ruler is desperate to try and get this last little bit of turret before those turret plates do fall down.
That turret has been such an enemy of Gen.G. There's been so many resources to try to finish off. The fact that Ruler is here and not at this Drake means they cannot contest and not getting anything else on the map. I mean, look at where Thresh and Graves are right now. They're rotating over looking for a pick, but I don't know if this is coming through. Turret's still up.
I'm pretty sure the turret will go down here. I think the problem with Gen.G not going for Drake was the position that the rest of the map was in, because you do have to kind of hard force it if you want to try and get it before going combat, because the death times at this point in time are still so short, and it is a risk that you take. Gen.G clearly going, holding up the opinion that if they get into late game, they're still fine. The important thing is, thanks to the kill from BDD and the turret being picked up, the gold lead now negligible.
Yeah, no, it is completely tied up here. Only 400 in it, which means about nothing, especially when we factor in that both of these teams want to be playing for about that 30-minute mark to really hit their stride. As we are going to check this one out once again.
Just a really proactive play once again from BDD here. Over the wall, puts his ultimate here, and the Scout of the Week is actually what finishes him. He just knows he has that extra damage. Comes in and punishes that overextension. And BDD, you know, very mental player, getting an extra early kill here this early on after that very unfortunate pick. You know, that we did see Canyon get. It's a nice bounce back for him.
It also means that the pick potential that is available for Gen.G remains way more relevant than it otherwise would be, as Canyon might get caught here.
Yep, Scout of the Week comes down. Cliff not actually opting in for anything, so maybe we're going to rotate it up. As now, speaking of rotations, we've got some teleports coming in here. Barrel and Ghost getting closed in on. There's a teleport to come through from Khan. Unfortunately, Russell, he does find it actually in the end, but he gets blown up. And this is the problem. There were turrets down, and this was the setup that, of course, the Heimerdinger wanted, and clearly he's going to have to collaterally damage himself away.
Teleport disadvantage, you know, you come into this situation thinking you're actually up a member, you know, and as Gen.G, but what objective are you really looking for here? You're just looking for a pick, and Damwon sniff it out so early, so easily, get those teleports through, you end up trading a kill in your advantage, and now you're going to get a turret.
It's also pre-item spike, right? We see Cliff now pick up the shield though. BDD doesn't actually have his first item finished yet either, so that's a couple of extra items that can really help you in a scrimmage like that. You saw the damage that was done, even at the back end of that fight, thanks to the nice scatter. And if you have your items finished and you're a little bit more cohesive there, if Rascal doesn't teleport quite that deep, you might be able to salvage that. And this is not really necessary from Gen.G. You don't need to force like that.
And one thing that we haven't actually spoken about yet is you just saw Ruler teleport in towards the top side of the map. Do you guys have an opinion on the lack of a more defensive summoner spell and instead going for more of this proactive map movement style of summon?
I think against Damwon, yeah, it makes a lot of sense, because the team that sets this team apart above everything else, because I actually think Gen.G in terms of like raw team fighting power can match them, is their macro, right? It's how they're able to trade early, how in the mid to late game they will sometimes give up things, but they will always get more in return. You see them do this every single time, and a teleport helps you alleviate that, and you're not actually that at risk against the center Heimerdinger lane. You get sure, but the kill threat is negligible.
I mean, it allows you to be more relevant on the map early as well, and you know, we've seen so many times that Aphelios rotation to the top lane does so much damage here.
Yeah, Sheffinger actually forced a flash from underneath this turret as Chaos Storm was traded, but Canyon looks to be taking Shirley pretty comfortably.
Yeah, it's not just a K-Ram we're watching here. There's a lot of pressure in mid to actually allow Canyon to try to take this away. Gen.G sniff it out though.
Yeah, they rotate over. Control ward there. Can be cleared here by Clit to the best of his ability. All 5 members of both teams milling about in the river. BDD down to about half life, in a bit of trouble as the train is going to park itself into the wall, but it does buy exactly the right amount of space for Damwon here to secure the return.
This is Damwon Kia to T, right? You push mid, you use a lot of resources. You use a Scion ult to cut them off, and you just are able to, by the skin of your teeth, pull a Riptail out of a hat here, and that's what Kia does so well. You can take a small edge in the mid lane and you turn it into such a huge advantage.
Do you think that the double teleport or the double summoner usage there is something that may come to bite him? And here we see the double teleport, as pointed out, is a really big problem here. Rascal also crucially hasn't hit the levels where you get great numbers of hitting, so he's not that insanely tanky on that we know we're going to see later in the game. And there you also see that scatter hit show the collateral damage. It's nice, but they haven't hit their spikes yet. They haven't actually converted their gold, meaning that if you get killed there, it's all of a sudden that place gets around, right? And Gen.G, they're very hungry here, but the gold lead still relatively even. I think this mountain fight is going to be super pivotal for both of these two teams.
If Damwon and Kia get this mountain streak, that almost locks up every single team fight for the rest of the game. They're always going to have the ability to take it on their terms, right? They will never have to force the fight. They're willing to give Gen.G the opportunity to take just one mountain streak instead of the soul, right? So this is really important for Gen.G to take down the momentum right now. But look at where everyone is positioned on the map here for Damwon and Kia. They're already grouped up. They already have the new man. Rascal's cut off. Like, this seems almost untakeable for Gen.G right now.
Yeah, he's on towards the side. Rascal is going to try and get himself back in. LoL Esports does deny some of the CC. Is cleared BD in position. BD, you can see charging up for that potential ultimate. But the Herald is used, right? This is straight out of a textbook from Damwon Kia, trying to get all of that control. This Canyon is going to get collateral damage to the face, but they have a center. They have all of the extra regen on their side. And Canyon, he will be back up to health in a pretty short time as these basic darknesses start to come in. But Gen.G, they have position. There's the Moonlight Vigil. Gravity is going to help out as well. On. Gets a triple knockdown to the Northern Shadow. Lands on Perul, and now Damwon Kia trying to get back into this team by Canyon. Out of it already. The Scion is dead. Down to zombie mode. And Cliff secures the dragon. Gen.G have extraordinarily low health bars. Damwon Kia cannot find it though. They cannot find the chase. And they'll be denied the Drake and denied a kill.
And ladies and gentlemen, I give you Damwon and Kia. The fight is perfect for Gen.G. I mean, the opening of that fight is about as good as you can ask for. It's about the best engage you could ever get. Yet still Damwon and Kia end up trading it back, end up tying up the fight. He got control of the Drake pit. Sure, they did not get the Drake, and that's massive. Gen.G do have that extra buffer now. But if you see a fight start off this well for Gen.G and it still ends up even, you got to be really worried about how it's going to go later on.
That's the rule difference, baby. You find the insane ultimate, because two ultimates were already used, right? They blow everything trying to kill Clay. But then this setup is beautiful, and this is what I'm looking forward to see what these late game seems like is going to happen. Both Khan and Rascal are trying to do the same thing, but the Phoenios is insane at shredding down tanks. Even this earlier doesn't even have his little Dominic's yet, and then the secure from Clay. Because Canyon is so low, he can't quite walk up as much as he usually would, and that means that this game is going to remain close, at least till the next Drake fight.
Yeah, I actually think that is extraordinarily pivotal for keeping Gen.G in this game. As we can see, gold lead, gigantic for the Felios, but this is of course a very confusing faster center situation, so we're going to ignore that. Everywhere else, extraordinarily close, right?
Yeah.
Khan has a slight advantage on the top side, but otherwise, nothing to write home about.
I think the Heimerdinger pick was just so perfect because it slows down a lot of what Aphelios can do in lane. Usually, is often getting more turret places than able to get. I think that's part of why you see the teleport here as well, so they get a fast track to the lane swap. But unfortunately, that turret at the top side was traded, and they weren't able to take it out until so long into the game. The Aphelios isn't as online as he would like to be at this stage in the game. If he does have stellar dominance regardless of what's faster in this game, maybe the next streak fight can actually be one that Gen.G could hope to take. But at this stage in time, even with that perfect engage from Rascal after the Moonlight Vigil comes out, Damwon and Kia are able to turn around. I'm worried about how well Gen.G can actually fight these scrappy fights, even with a good engage. What happens when the engage is bad? What happens when you actually have Khan flanking and somebody gets caught? I mean, how do you win those fights? That's what I'm most concerned about here.
I actually think that the primary engagement of Damwon Kia is not nearly as consistent, because Science engagement, we've seen this a couple of times happen already, is incredibly telegraphed, right? I think Science generally is the strongest when he's a secondary initiator, when he has something like an Alistair that can just bull rush in and then follow up with the lockdown. Whereas obviously yes, ornaments are insane, but like the fact that Call of the Forge God is long range, non-committal, insane engage that can just find backlines basically guaranteed, and it's so on into the scatter the week, right? Is I think something that will keep Gen.G relevant throughout the entirety of this game, even with the rate advantage.
Yeah, the thing that I want to mention though is the fact that I don't think Damwon here ever really want to engage. They have a Heimerdinger composition. What they're trying to do is establish vision control around their objectives that they're looking for, and then make Gen.G come to them. And then if Gen.G do, then they have to walk into Heimerdinger, which is extraordinarily difficult to deal with. I think so much of this hinges on who's going to have that vision.
And that's where the Udyr comes into play, right? Because the Udyr is so great at clearing vision. I mean, speak of the devil, he's going in right now and taking a lot of this away. He's getting a lot of extra information that they posture around this Baron hit. And Baron is off, and it's something that can be rushed down by Damwon here. They don't have an insane rush speed on it just yet, but it is pretty quick with the Heimer here. So Gen.G have to respect this lack of vision. While they have this vision control, they're allowed to give Showmaker a turret. Why not? Because there's no way that anyone can catch him off guard when you have this much vision control. The last Drake fight that Gen.G took, they actually were able to wrestle positional advantage away. If vision does go to Damwon here, and they actually have that set up first on some of these objective fights, that's when I'm worried, because that's when you're going to struggle to get value out of Rascal Gold.
And what I love is that Ruler went for the rapid fire cannon here, because one of the issues that he will have as the Aphelios is range. Aphelios is really strong when people are trying to engage into him, but against the Senna, a Heimerdinger, a Victor, that's not going to happen nearly as much. Sure, it's nice to pump up those damage numbers and attack harder. You always feel good about that afterwards, but you actually want to win the game, and I think that the rapid fire cannon provides you with a little bit more, especially as we saw, if you get a Graviton auto up, if you get the root on someone, you can turn that into a really aggressive play. I do want him to see get more Dominic's max, because Khan is getting tankier and tankier, and eventually it's going to be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, if you are able to catch somebody out of position with the Ornhorn, or you're able to get a hook, right, that miracle hook that's not supposed to happen, that's when the rapid fire cannon is really going to be a huge asset to you, because you can actually get that extra hit off, you can get that extra damage off, maybe force a flash, force somebody out of the team fight. As we do have 15 seconds to this next break, and look at where the position is. This is what I'm talking about. Damwon here set up this time. How do you crack this as Gen.G? It's going to be so difficult. Damwon here has control of the vision here if they clear this ward. I mean, how do you walk into this?
Yeah, Russell trying to face Jet. The only one that really can here on the Gen.G side. You can see Damwon here, though, they lose control of the mid lane. They do now have to move away from the dragons. The vision is established. You just need to make sure you can see Beryl shooting on towards the bottom side, making sure that he can get there, get his positional situation sorted. It does love to do, but Clear trying to come through and clear. You can see how dangerous it is, though, for Gen.G to try and crack this one open. End of the week now on cooldown. Canyon thinking about this as an opportunity. Down to about half health. His health bar is actually very important. Ruler still holding on to well. Ultimate everywhere for both of these teams right now. As Khan looks for the flanking option. Rascal a lot lower than he'd otherwise want to be to actually frontline in this potential team fight.
They have to dodge every single shot coming through from Barrel as well, so the pacing of this is so slow. The chip war being won by Damwon here. Here comes Khan.
Yeah, we'll see whether Khan can actually get into position as he avoids a lot of these skill shots. Ruler out of the way of the Scion. He's got the close range weapons. Here comes the call of Force God. Finds the knockup, but it's only on the Khan. It's Dawn in Shadow. Gets all of those big old shields onto Damwon here. Gen.G still jostling right now, but the fight hasn't actually started. And now there's no call to Force God to try and get that advantage. Sun lands onto the Heimerdinger, but immediately barrels back up to full health. That's going to be soul point now for Damwon here.
They just walk away. They don't have to fight this. They absolutely do not need to. They get out of here. This is the war of attrition. It feels like you are going to struggle to lose this Gen.G every time.
Big old rockets coming through there from Barrel.
Really nice sidestep, and here you see the value of the Senna as well, right? Whereas it's not as insane as something like a Seraphine, the combination of the range advantage, which in of itself is manageable, but combined with the Senna using, you can consistently get those profiles up the full, and then once that comes to full shot use, you have a problem.
Oh no, Ruler's in Ruler's position, and he's caught immediately out. How many times has he died at exactly this point of the map?
It's happened so many times in really high, stressful, important situations, right? In best of fives, you get caught like this, you lose a Baron. And at least they're going to lose control of the vision here, and this is the same problem that they're going to have Gen.G are on this objective fight as they were on the last, is that in those war of attrition moments, the Senna healing is going to add up.
The good thing here, though, is that Ruler actually didn't use his flash, which sounds weird, but with everyone else up on Gen.G, even with their insane damage towards Baron, Damwon can't actually go for it, meaning that for a subsequent fight, which is what's really going to matter, because in 4 minutes, it's going to be the Drake, Baron is just relevant from any point on onwards, the moment that there's no time for available on someone in Gen.G side lane goes too deep, and if Gen.G don't hit those spikes, and they don't find the engage, we see what happens here.
Yeah, let's have a look at it one more time. Well, it was exactly like you said, a war of attrition, but one team has a healing ability.
Yeah, one team has a healing ability. Once the Call of Forge God comes out here, you know, as Damwon Kia, that you actually have freedom to move forward, right? And this is when you see Gen.G unfortunately unable to walk any farther forward because they knew they had Call of Forge God if they wanted to actually commit to the fight. Once it's gone, you kind of have to sit back and take a back seat here. There's no one to stop the Drake. And you can see at this point, like, yes, they could try to trade forward here because Damwon Kia did go extremely far forward onto the Drake, but if you try to chase, it's just never a race you're going to win. And then this is Ruler unfortunately getting caught here, farming, didn't have vision, and that's the end of that. They don't get the Baron, and there was a very important ward actually that just now got cleared for Gen.G, so they knew this and weren't, you know, rushing over there to deny it.
Well, 5 members of Gen.G now grouped up in the mid lane, Sion splitting on the bottom side, teleport after ready. Someone here probably aware that Gen.G has more friends in here than are currently on Vision. They're not going to be playing very respectfully, but a lot of pings out here from Damwon Kia. They're like, why aren't they defending this turret? As Khan is just getting to work.
I will make his way over now, and of course nothing interesting happens on the top lane matchup. Unfortunately, it is a good old classic wet ruler fight. Rascal has it level 13 though, so he's gonna, or level 14 rather, so he's gonna start building up the upgrades. And once the free item spikes are hit on Brutal and Plague, I think these fights are gonna look a lot more contentious because you need to be much more respectful of the burst and the raw damage that comes out as Damwon Kia. However, as pointed out already, with Mountain Drake and Soul Point being secured now by Damwon Kia, you can never ever give that up. And it means that it's so much easier. They can just trade the Baron and they're completely fine.
Yeah, and it's also so telegraphed, right? Like, Damwon Kia, they can move either to a Baron or a Drake. Both of those options are extraordinarily good for them. However, Gen.G, the only thing that is going to be super great for them to pick up at this point, in time, is the Baron. That's going to give them all of their advantages. Whereas just one Mountain Drake, that's valuable. That's one in a line that they're going to have to keep on grabbing and keep denying from Damwon Kia. And Damwon Kia with a macro advantage? I mean, they're terrifying when they don't have a macro advantage.
Exactly, and you know, right now this is going to be a fight over vision. It's going to be a fight over positioning. Now, Damwon Kia have to take that fight on 2 fronts because they don't want to trade objectives. They want to have everything, right? They want to have to take and eat it. And their position in this game where I think they should absolutely look to deny Gen.G from any opportunity to try to trade. The problem is the composition needs some hard to set up, right? And it's hard to set up in 2 places at once. So they need to clear every single ward and control these choke points. And where they are right now is the timer ticks down. They wish it was actually a little bit further ahead of where it is because the time here allows Gen.G to teleport. It allows them to actually try to rotate over towards the Baron and pull Damwon Kia apart.
Yeah, and now the item spike has been hit. Lordonic Regard coming through for Ruler. This next fight, he's going to do a lot more damage front to back than he otherwise would. Kang and Khan do need to be a little bit more frightened. But I think that setup conversation that we've had is still so important. Khan spotted on Vision. Ruler looking to move on over it. Canyon finds BDD out of position. He flashes, but he can't make it towards the lantern. And now the box is set up, but it's just not going to be good enough. Now Rascal, he's also out of position. Clears at half health. Ruler is running for the hills, and Gen.G are falling apart.
Oh, this is definitely going to be basically game. I mean, at this stage, you get all the objectives, right? A huge pick on BDD. He's out of position, but also Khan was ready there to cut the rest of the team in half. Even if you don't get that BDD pick, even if he somehow miraculously gets away, that was always going to be Damwon Kia's advantage.
And it is Damwon Kia making such good use of the pressure that they have, knowing that when push comes to shove, they can give up this objective, right? Like, it's not something that they 100% need to go for. And the attempt of Gen.G to select untick Khan is always something that's going to take so much time. And now it's a miracle steal for play all the game.
The grenade lands! He takes the lantern. Split is going to make it out, but I mean, that's where the good news ends as BDD comes on over. He's spotted out on Vision. And now all we need is time to get a move into that pit, and that Baron basically gets swift and then dies. He's not even going to get there. Doesn't need to. And that is both Mountain Soul and the Baron on our defending world champions. Damwon Kia look to try and close the door on game 1.
And if you were trying to set up for advantages, right, for objectives, if you had to be the first one there, you're going to want this one to get. This is BDD just putting on for the rest of the group. And you guys, I mean, this is what happens in here. There's no way out. You're not getting out of here never, no matter what. Khan is healing so well for the rest of Gen.G, so they can't come in and save him. There's no way to make a trade here. But yeah, you're talking about controlling the pits now with all the Baron buff that's going to come through with all the minions, the wave control you're going to have. Like, how do you ever get to the projected first? How do you ever take this Elder Drake? I mean, it's going to be basically 1 in a million chance.
And of Gen.G is that they don't fight well in choke points. So rather, Damwon Kia's comp in choke points is unplayable, right? Because you have a Victor that is doing AoE damage. You have a Barrel Heimerdinger that is just throwing rockets, throwing grenades. You can't get through Khan, you can't get through Kenny. They need the open space, and that's the part we saw earlier when they can actually pull apart, right? When they can fight it straight in front of back without everyone being one person is at wolves, one person is in the middle of the lane. They're good, but I think at this point, after that mistake, you need the most insane front to back team fight, and even that, I don't think Damwon Kia are going to give you the opportunity. They have a power so it's so much harder to get that done.
Yeah, and they have a Scion in the front as well. And I don't want to be that guy, you know, that talks about mistakes and things like that, but life has just been that little bit too late on so many pivotal landings in this game so far. And once again, BB going to get stunned up, and now Rascal's there, gets the flash out of Showmaker, goes, he's going to get knocked up, and Khan has found a flank. Ruler is exploding, but he's still alive now. Sonic Shadow just narrowly avoided, but Khan, he's just unkillable right now on this Scion. Now he finds himself a turret. He's got Gargoyle, Stone Plate. Ain't no way he's dying. He's going to flash, get himself out of the way. His unleashed power still needs to be respected, but with no Ruler, it's going to be so difficult for Gen.G to defend the base, and it looks like it's going to get cracked at this push.
Yeah, this is going to be the push to take the inhibitor, maybe even take the game. With no Ruler here, you just don't have the damage to challenge this anymore.
So scary.
I mean, Khan basically just 1v5 that team fight. I'm just at that tanky.
I'm looking back to that trash talk video, gentlemen, where Khan was like, sit down, young men, time to learn something, you know? And he's certainly doing it here today, just no fear, standing in the front line, punishing his former teammates and friends on Gen.G.
And it's on sign as well, right? Like they call it a side one trick, I guess, so what? I don't care. Like, yeah, I might be a side one trick, but I'm still crushing your team, and that's what's happening here. And I'm very happy to see the return of Damwon Kia actually play, control, and play the early game well. Because I stand by my criticism in the whole live series where they disrespected things like the Silence, the voting ban, but the team that we're seeing here is much more reminiscent of the team that won Worlds, that didn't have an early game gap that they kind of had to go through, which we've seen this play. It's just been from start to finish, and we see the ability of some of these champions being wrong.
I have Ruler, he's all by himself here, right? And no one knows where Khan is. He catches him in the back. Barrel is there to actually swipe the volleyball, right? I mean, it's so easy. It's super easy setup. I mean, this is a long-range play from Khan, and what do you do is you have to defend. You can't just sit back and take it and use that forward.
And the problem is that with this composition, Aphelios should be way safer. Aphelios should be fine, honestly. Like, you have the Thresh for this reason. The moment you hear that noise, life should be there. Should be able to actually protect Ruler, because one side is actually on top. If he ever hits the knockup, it's just over. Like, that's the end of it. Thresh needs to be there.
Well, Damwon Kia, they still need to win the game. Currently, they have a 7,000 gold lead. All of their ducks are in a row. 2 inhibitors down. And now it's Elder Drake that's going to be on the menu next when it comes to these neutral objectives. If they get that, I feel like that is the final nail in the coffin that is already getting lowered into the ground, is what it kind of feels like. Damwon Kia, they're not even wanting to waste that time. 1.5 minutes. They have to wait, but there is a very juicy inhibitor turret here that Ghost is just chipping away at pretty comfortably here.